52-3 Ole Miss won. We're going to react to it. We're going to have a roundtable, and we're going to talk about what this game means and what Ole Miss fans can expect moving forward. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. On today's reaction roundtable, it is the first day of the NFL, so bear with us if the numbers are a little bit smaller than it normally is. But we'll dive into Ole Miss's dominant 52-3 win over Middle Tennessee and what it means moving forward. We'll break down key performances and what stood out in this statement victory. Plus, we'll look ahead to the Wake Forest matchup, which is shaping up to be a crucial game as we continue building momentum for the season. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC and Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They provide other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and of course, Ole Miss. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast. So it is pretty good. I am joined tonight by Zach Morth from the Rebel Walk and Dalen Flowers from, well, you know Dalen. Everybody knows Dalen, man. He does the Dalen Show. He has his own podcast, and he appears on this channel quite a bit as well. Dalen, welcome. Zach, welcome. How you guys doing?
I'm great, Steven, man. It's good to be back, and I'm ready to talk some Ole Miss ball.
Yeah, it's nice that we're going to do this reaction roundtable with a couple of students. That is something that I'm kind of interested in, just to get the students' perspective on what happened last night. We're going to start with you, Zach, and you asked the question right before we came on the air about whether or not everybody should be concerned about Ole Miss's secondary moving forward. And honestly, I do not think so. It was a situation where the defense was, I don't know, they lost their intensity after being up 38-0. At the beginning of the game, Middle Tennessee could do nothing. It was almost comical at the level that they just couldn't do anything. Then at a certain point, they lost their intensity. Middle Tennessee is an air raid team. That's what they were last year. So they were going to have some success in the pass game. They were within a touchdown of Missouri last year, I believe, and they beat Miami in Miami 2 years ago. So I'm not calling Middle Tennessee good. I'm just saying they're proficient. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. If this was a real SEC game, the defensive line would be scheming up protections and ways to attack the protection to put pressure on the quarterback. This team was kind of playing very vanilla coverage. It's like, hey, cover 3, hey, cover 1, and stuff like that. So that is my opinion on that, Zach.
Yeah, and once you broke it down, Steven, you provided me a much better perspective in that the second Middle Tennessee actually reached the red zone. Ole Miss turned it up a few notches, and nothing ever really came to fruition. I also do want to give credit to Middle Tennessee. There were a couple passes that their quarterback made that were just flat out really good.
That Nicholas Vattiato is a good player. He's a good little quarterback.
Yeah, no, we were from the student section. I was like, whoa, like coverage was tight there. He just fitted in a really narrow window and he made it happen. But again, like you said, Steven, again, I don't think there should be any concern in the secondary looking back on it because they didn't score a touchdown. So, and I've seen people on Twitter, they're concerned or, that was the one thing that stuck out to them. But again, they're really, when you actually look back and dissect the game, I don't think there was anything to be too worried about. So it's credit to your point. And again, I'm really excited to watch them next week too.
Dalen, Ole Miss has outscored their first two opponents 128-3. Ole Miss has the number 1 passing offense, the number 1 total offense, the number 1 scoring offense, the number 3 scoring defense in the nation. So help me out. What are some negatives? If I need to nitpick on something, what do I need to nitpick on?
Oh, it's a great question, man. I honestly don't know, man. Like I think as we go throughout the games a little bit more, I don't know what that concern would be. I could say that maybe we could spread the ball out a little bit more, maybe if anything. I know Trey Harris is obviously our guy, and shout out to what he did this past weekend. Just looked unbelievable. Just looked really pure and confident. And it's crazy because Lane came out closer to the season starting a couple weeks ago in press conferences, and I believe he said that Trey had been the most improved player this offseason, which you could arguably say Trey was also our best player last season. So that says a lot about his transition progression this offseason as well. But I think Trey was directed a lot because he's obviously the number one guy. He knows the offense really well. But him and Dart have a connection as well. But that maybe be the only thing that I'll say is just maybe kind of spreading that ball a little bit better. But I think we did better than that after the first quarter. Juice Willis got that touchdown. I think we got Jordan Watkins out there, and he got a little comfortable with how the offense is looking at with the different running back situations as well. I think Aiden Williams just looked significantly well just in terms of the play recognition he's been able to get over the first two games. So I really wouldn't say anything as a negative. I just think we need to kind of continue to progress. We still have a lot of question marks, I think, in terms of who's actually going to start on the offensive line. Maybe I know we had some guys that were out this weekend, and some guys that maybe we think can start, and some guys that have started and may not start going to the SEC play coming in a few weeks. So that may be a question mark in terms of how focused and how healthy the offensive line will be in the next coming weeks. But necessarily, I don't see anything in terms of negative on the offense right now.
You know, it's an interesting thing that I look at, Dalen, that I genuinely think Trey has gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
He looks like a better version. He was really good a year ago, but he genuinely looks better. And I don't care about the players that he's going up against. I'm talking about looking at Trey and the way he handles his own business. If you're running routes on air, a 7 route is a 7 route. Yeah. But that 7 route this year looks better than it did a year ago. That's what I'm talking about.
And that's crazy to think about it as well, my man, because that first game he had against Mercer last year, he had 4 touchdowns, and I think in the first half, and then the Tulane game before he gets hurt, he had a touchdown on the first drive. So his progression is just really look really poised. He's come in, and I say this wholeheartedly, he's looked like an NFL-ready wide receiver right now. He lines up to the line of scrimmage really well. His hands look really well. He's running his routes really well. He's understanding where to go, how to go. He's been blocking really well, which is another thing I've seen him improve a lot up the field. He's just doing a lot really well. He's controlling himself really well. And he looks a lot more dominant than he did last year. When I say that, I can see a little bit more structure on him. He's looked like he's picked up the weights this offseason. He just looks really built. And I think, we had a conversation about this a little bit throughout this offseason. He's really ready to make a mark against certain teams this year. And I think he's really ready to make a name for him being, hopefully a first-round draft pick after this year. And I think he's taking that in consideration. What can I do right now to not only do that, but help really put the fear in other teams when they hear about Ole Miss's offense? I think we've gotten to the point now where we're not okay with just putting up the big numbers and, we got a great offense. We want to put fear in the teams. When people see our offense and they watch film on us, they're like, okay, we got to put 2 guys on Trey Harris. We got to put 2 guys on Jordan Watkins, on Juice Wells. We got to do different things differently to stop this offense from running up the field on us.
Yeah, it's really funny, Zach, talking about, like, I've spent the better part of the last 6 months talking about how Ole Miss's whole goal in the transfer portal this year was to take double teams off of Trey Harris. And now that Ole Miss has done that, you can see what this offense can look like, because I'm going to tell you something right now. There is going to be a game this season that Juice Wells goes for 2 bills.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen flashes of it already, and the thing I like about Juice is even when Trey was getting the ball like he was yesterday, really early and often in the game, there was never any sign of, negative body language from Juice. And eventually his time came. He started to get more catches and then finally got his touchdown later in the second half there. But yeah, just it's mind-boggling thinking that Juice Wells, Trey Harris, Caden Prescourt, and Jordan Watkins, you can even throw Daquan Wright in there, they could all be on the field at the same time. How do you stop that? And again, the competition hasn't been up to par to really give us a true glimpse of what that is going to look like. But, we're getting closer to games like Kentucky and South Carolina to really see how SEC teams are going to game plan against Ole Miss, because I don't see an efficient way to stop that. No. You double Trey, okay, we'll throw it to Caden, we'll throw it to Juice, we'll throw it to Jordan Watkins, and then Trey's one-on-one, throw the ball down the field, he's going to make a play. So it's really exciting for Ole Miss. And then you take into account what Henry Parrish is doing in the run game. I'm feeding into a lot of rat poison here, but it's really exciting, especially as an Ole Miss fan.
Dalen, in the game, Ulyses Bley did not play in the first half. And Lane Kiffin on tonight actually said that There wasn't injury. There wasn't discipline problem. It's just that the running back room is super competitive right now. Henry Parrish is the hot running back, and Matt Jones deserved carries against the first and second team.
And you kind of question that, and you're not seeing you be in that first half, but coming out afterwards, I'm okay with it. And here's why. I've been having conversations with people over the last few weeks, and we've come to the point where we're asking, when do we kind of say, okay, we don't maybe need to play a certain guy these first couple of games because we don't want to risk that injury potential for later on in the season. I'm okay with that. Now, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes for that to happen, but look, we planned this season. We've talked about this season. People have understood what this season is, and that's hopefully to be playing in December, come late December, and hopefully in January as well for this football team. So we have to understand the consequences that can happen in these first couple of games, and that is injury, and that's just a part of the game, whether we want to understand it or not. And we don't have to risk, getting UB hurt. We don't have to risk getting some of these receivers or some of our O-line, hurt or beat up in these games right now when they don't need to be. I think it's a time that UB has played under this system with this team for a long time and understands what it takes and how this offense is going to work. So I don't think, that could have been the right move right now. We need him going later on in the offseason. I actually have been under the weather this week, so I spent the weekend home watching football. And, Logan Diggs was on the TV, and I'm like, holy crap, I forgot we got Logan Diggs. And, later on coming in the season, that can be really big for us. So it's a development thing, and it's so just refreshing to talk about it because we've heard this and we've said this before, but that depth is kind of what separated us from being elite last year. And that's crazy to say that we won 11 games, but I think that separated us from getting over that Bama hump and over that Georgia hump. And now that we sit here and we're talking about the situation, it's funny, but it's also an awesome moment to have because now we understand what it's going to be able to do for us in the later on of the season.
Yeah, and also still coming up on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the reaction roundtable. Jaxson Dart set an SEC record for consecutive completions in a game, and if you add consecutive games, he set that record as well. That's probably the first of many records that he is going to have falling, but we'll talk about that right after this. When you're hiring for your small business, you need to find the right professionals, people who are truly going to fit your role and help your business grow. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. I have personally used LinkedIn to find top-notch candidates, and the platform really is easy to filter through and find quality people quickly. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It's a network full of professionals you will not find anywhere else. And what is great is even those who aren't actively searching might see the role and realize it's exactly what they're looking for. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other major job sites. So if you're looking on places other than LinkedIn, you probably might be missing out on the best candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And honestly, it's what you need in today's market. If you want to hire like a professional, use LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before this weekend's action. The SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12. They have squad videos that release on Thursday night every single week on the Locked On Network. You can get it all from Locked On's stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? Which teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And shout out to Hugh Freeze for doing us all real proud at Auburn and taking that L to the Cal Bears. Congratulations.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a mess. That one, Notre Dame tripping up against Northern Illinois. Oregon slipping up a little bit and almost costing the game against Iowa and against Boise State. Yeah. Just remember, when everybody tells you Ole Miss hadn't played anybody, well, neither did these teams, and they lost to these teams and nearly lost to them. So remember that 128-3 is 128-3. Isn't that right, Dalen?
Yeah, man, it was a crazy weekend. Like I was able to sit back and like my first weekend kind of in a while and just kind of sitting back and watching football. But Bama, I know that in score for the Bama USF game isn't going to show, but Bama struggled against USF, and I know it's a completely new system, but I've kind of said it. I'm surprised they're still ahead of us in the AP poll. I was surprised they were put ahead of us in the AP poll in the beginning. But it's not. You can sit here and say it's Furman, Middle Tennessee, all you want. But these teams have come out and showed they have some heart. They have some schemes they can put up against some big teams. So don't count those little teams out, man.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt ran out of fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm celebrating after touchdowns against Alcorn. I'm telling you, the Vanderbilt Commodores, the most free money bet in the history of free money bets was Vandy over 2.5 wins this season.
Yeah, go ahead, Dalen.
I'm really happy for Vandy. Like I really am. I know they've been through a misery over the last as long as I've been alive, and so to see them even in this position and they look like a completely new football team. They look poised on both sides. I watched the game and they look really good on both sides. I'm not saying how far they're going to go in SEC, but they look a lot better than a lot of SEC teams right now. That's really makes me feel happy to say that about Vanderbilt football.
Right. And Jaxson Dart had a big game against Middle Tennessee over the weekend. Like I said, he set a record for the most consecutive completions in a ball game. He started 24 of 24 for like 359 yards. It was absolutely ridiculous. Take the 6 completions that he closed the Furman game out with and ended up with a nice 30. He missed the all-time record by 1 or 2 throws in the NCAA. Listen, tomorrow's Locked On Ole Miss podcast, it's literally named Lane Kiffin has created a college football terminator in Jaxson Dart. And I honestly believe that because we were talking off air. This is the most Joe Burrow of a quarterback I've seen that wasn't that Joe Burrow team. If you told me that Jaxson Dart only cared about football for the next 4 months in his life, I would absolutely believe it because he's acting like it.
Yeah, one of the quotes that resonated with me post-game was Lane talking about how Jaxson prepares for every game like it's the national championship. And when Lane is going out and saying that, the guy who never gives his players any credit seemingly or doesn't feed into any of that rat poison stuff, you better believe it's true. In every play, Jaxson is poised and he has the most confidence that he's ever looked that I've ever seen in his career. And one of the things that's most impressive to me is looking back from his freshman year, or not his freshman year, but his first year with Ole Miss, it's just a completely different player from the mindset to his going through his progressions and finally making the throw. Also, his arm strength and his accuracies looked miles and miles better than last
his
year.
Ball placement there's nobody in college football that has better ball placement than Jaxson Dart.
Exactly. And I was telling Steven, Dalen, but one of his incompletions, it's a perfect ball to Trey Harris that probably would have been a touchdown, but the defender got his hand on it. So he's locked in, man. And I'm just fired up to watch him play this year.
Yeah, Dalen, if you look at it, he has 8 touchdowns that he's accounted for, 6 passing and 2 running, and he has 7 incompletions that he has accounted for this season through 2 games. And 3 of those games were probably on tip passes, if we're going to be real about it. It is unreal what he's doing right now.
He looks poised, man, and I feel confident about that going into the season. And we've talked about this, but one of my biggest goals this offseason, and people kept asking me, what was your goal? And I kept saying, I want to see Jaxson Dart in New York come the end of the season. And right now I see that, he looks like he's leading his team on the field very well. He looks poised, he looks confident. He just looks like he's owning the entire field better than I've ever seen him do. He just looks truly comfortable in the play calls. He looks like he understands where everything has to be and where it needs to be. Right now, I'm seeing his head on a level that I've never seen it before. And like you said, his placement, that's something that's always been talked about. I remember reading a lot of articles about him coming out of high school at USC when he first got here, is that can he make the downfield reads better than what he's seen him do? And right now, like Steven said, man, he's putting it on the money. And that gives me a lot of comfort in late game situations going into the season because I haven't seen him really be able to do that consistently yet. And right now he's doing it without ease. And man, it's just a bit of kind of relaxation for me to see him go out there and be able to do what he's been doing so far.
All right. Thanks for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we are going to move and start talking about some of the other things that happened around the conference and around college football this weekend. It was a pretty good weekend. It was definitely an entertaining one.
Yeah.
But first, I want to tell you about this. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. They have killer last-minute deals all on prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. They take the guesswork, Game Time that is, out of buying Ole Miss tickets. There's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway. But with Game Time, you can see exactly the view from your seat before you buy the tickets. Their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. They just genuinely take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might be able to help you out with tickets as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So it's been a decently big week. After Notre Dame beat Texas A&M, everybody freaked out because Notre Dame beat Texas A&M. Then Notre Dame goes home and gets beat by Northern Illinois. Oregon's had back-to-back struggle bus games that they won against Idaho and then against Boise State. That running back from Boise State's really good, by the way. It's been a really interesting week. And in the SEC, if you want to look at the SEC, there's probably 6 teams that are really good. I would say that Georgia, Texas, I would count Alabama in there. Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee are really good. You know what you have from those teams. Then there's a drop-off. You saw that. Auburn lost to Cal. LSU, honestly, I don't want to say fraud, but you don't lose a Heisman Trophy winner and 2 generational wide receivers with the worst defense in human history and get better. I mean, that's the way that works. So the lower part of the conference might be weaker than we realize, but the top part, like 6 of the top 7 teams in the AP poll are SEC teams this year. Dalen.
Yeah, man, just being able to watch a lot of the games. I'm sure we'll talk later on and throughout the season about that Arkansas game and how funky it always is between us. But they didn't look half bad, even though I know they ended up losing. I got a chance to watch that Kentucky-South Carolina game because those are going to be 2 teams that we play. Carolina looks to be better than I thought they were going to be kind of right now. And so it's exciting to see how those 2 teams matched up. But it's crazy because, I keep forgetting that Texas is in the SEC now at times. But I think like 6 teams are in the top 10 right now. And, for everyone kind of going back and forth of is the SEC still going to be able to reign over college football? Absolutely. And by golly, I think it's never going to change. Texas looks, as much as I hate to say, they look really, really good. They do. And I think that, hopefully we get a chance to maybe see them in Atlanta at the end of the year. But it's going to be a fun one. But I think this reign of SEC is kind of what we expected, especially now the divisions are no longer a thing. And now it gives us a chance to see who really are the 2 best teams in the conference going forward.
Zach, Texas went up to the big house at Michigan and just completely took them apart. They genuinely looked like one of the best, probably 2 teams in college football. I figure in the SEC, there are 3 real contender teams. I think Ole Miss, Texas, and Georgia are the cream of the crop, and then that next tier of playoff level would be Alabama, Tennessee, and Missouri. I just think Nico being a freshman, I think that's going to bite them at some point. He is a really good quarterback, and by the time he's a junior, Tennessee might be winning the national championship.
Yeah, they looked – Tennessee even surprised me going to play a half-decent NC State team and fully just dominant the entire game. One thing I do want to discredit all the Aggie fans in the country because there's no more excuse as to why they lost to Notre Dame. So I do want to mention that. And then moving on to Auburn, Hugh Freeze, I can't wrap my head around this guy because they're probably going to play Alabama and Bama's going to be a top 10 team and somehow they'll win.
Mm-hmm.
I will never.
I hope so.
Right. Yeah.
I will take that trade right now.
Yeah, it just makes no sense to me, but I'm cool with it. Like you said, Steven. South Carolina, a little intimidating going on the road to Kentucky and putting up an absolutely dominant performance because they play in one of the most hostile stadiums in the country. And as we know, Ole Miss has to go there. But I do think it's going to be cool that we get to see Kentucky before South Carolina because we'll be able to kind of gauge, okay, South Carolina whooped them. We get a chance at them, so let's really go prove what we can do. But I think the overall theme of these weird upsets all over the country is that you can't take these games for granted. I know we're going to Wake Forest. They are not good by any – I'm not going to say that. It sounds rude, but they're not a great football program, and I think we can all admit that. They lost to Virginia yesterday, who's also not very good, have a notoriously good football program. So Ole Miss has to go in there and take care of business. This is their first road game and the only road game that they're going to have before they have to travel to South Carolina. So they need to prepare for it, get in a rhythm, and go take care of business against Wake Forest and do the same against Georgia Southern, because as we're seeing in the SEC – even with teams like Oregon, as we talked about, these are games that you can't take for granted and that you have to be ready to go to prepare for those later games in the season against, teams like Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, and all those difficult matchups.
What are your expectations for the game against Wake Forest, Dalen?
Oh, go ahead, Dalen.
I got a chance to watch Wake Forest game, which they blew against Virginia. They shouldn't have lost the game, but I think that our red zone offense is going to be really key. I think once we get to that part of the field, can we execute and can we push it into the end zone? I think that's going to be really big for us. And just making plays, making tackles on the defense. I think something that's kind of been a question mark for me in terms of where would the defense be aimed better at in terms of the offseason to now is, can our pass defense make tackles in the open field? I think we've seen improvements over the last two games in that retro. But I think it still can be improved. And I think if we are able to do that and avoid the big plays, I think we'll be okay against Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest defense is not horrible, but I think that they definitely have a lot of holes in their defense, and their offense pushed the ball up the field against Virginia pretty decently in the first half. But I think the second half, their guys look a little depleted and didn't have a four-quarter mentality that I thought that they should have. And so I think if we can make the plays in the defense and avoid the big plays, I think we'll be all right against Wake Forest.
Yeah, Wake Forest famously does the ride the running back end zone read. They always come towards the line of scrimmage. So the interior defensive line penetration will be key in this game. I did see in the game after Walter Nolan came off the field, hobbled with assistance. He was walking around with his helmet on, laughing with he looked like he was going to be okay. I do think, though, that interior defensive line penetration is going to be key. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be everything. Despite Wake Forest losing and not having a great showing yesterday, their quarterback slung it around a little bit. He threw it a little bit all over the field. So even more than stopping that run game, it's how can you apply pressure when in that passing offense. And then I think in terms of the Ole Miss offense is, how can you settle into the game once your set drives are over? That's something I thought they could have done better on last year, is how are we going to adapt to what the defense is playing us, and how are we going to, kind of switch things up? So later in that second, third, and fourth quarter, how is Jaxson Dart going to lead this offense? How's the helmet communication work for the first time on the road? I'm just excited to see all these unanswered questions and really see, how this Ole Miss team is going to respond after winning comfortably against Middle Tennessee and Furman.
All right, Zach Morth from the Rebel Walk, Dalen Flowers from the Dalen Show, and of course this channel as well. Thank y'all very much for stopping by tonight. Enjoy school, get plenty of rest in for the school week, and get ready to watch a very great Ole Miss versus Wake Forest game right in between Dawson's Creek and the season premiere of Arrow.
Let's do it, Steven. Thank you for having us, sir.
All right, take care.
Take care, my guy.
You can become an insider. What does that mean? Well, it's a texting program that we can do where you sign up for that. There's a nice little promo that can get you a nice deal at the beginning of the season, but we will notify you each and every day about the best and most important news around Ole Miss without having to deal with all those message board trolls. Anyway, I want everybody to look at that. It is the Insiders program. The link is down in the description. Please sign up. We do stuff on game day. We do all kinds of stuff, and they are the only ones that are allowed to interact with the show. So if you do that, you get to play ball. If not, you kind of have to look on the outside looking in. Anyway, we will talk to you later. Everybody have a good time. This has been the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Hope everybody is good.